Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention in the crystalline throne room of the Vextheri Empire, her military uniform crisp despite the 3-day journey through hyperspace. The alien architecture around her defied human comprehension, walls that seemed to breathe with bioluminescent patterns, gravity that flowed like water, and a ceiling that opened directly into the void of space without any visible barrier. The sovereign Zyxthera towered before her, its form a mesmerizing blend of insectoid grace and reptilian majesty. 6 arms moved in complex gestures while speaking, each motion deliberate and meaningful. Its compound eyes, each the size of Sarah's fist, reflected the chamber's ethereal glow as they fixed upon the lone human representative. "You come before the eternal throne as speaker for your species," the sovereign's voice resonated through translation devices implanted behind Sarah's ears. "Yet our preliminary scans of your vessel reveal something peculiar." Sarah maintained her composure despite the weight of representing all of humanity in this first contact scenario. Earth's governments had spent months preparing her for this moment, drilling diplomatic protocols and contingency plans into her memory. Nothing had prepared her for the sovereign's next words. "Are you without a partner?" The question hung in the air like a physical presence. "Our biological scanners indicate you traveled alone, without a bonded companion. How is this possible for a sapient being?" The question struck Sarah as oddly personal, but she had been briefed on the importance of cultural sensitivity. "I am unmarried, Your Sovereignty." Many humans choose to remain single, focusing on their careers or personal growth. The sovereign's 6 arms stopped moving entirely, a gesture Sarah's xenobiologist briefings had indicated meant extreme shock or confusion among the Vextheri. The massive alien leaned forward, its compound eyes seeming to study every detail of her face. "Unmarried," the sovereign repeated slowly, as if tasting an alien concept. "You speak of this as choice? Your species can exist in a state of emotional incompleteness, voluntarily?" "Emotional incompleteness?" Sarah frowned. "Your Sovereignty, I assure you that unmarried humans are perfectly complete individuals. We form friendships, pursue passions, contribute to society, impossible." The sovereign rose from its throne, its full height reaching nearly 4 meters. "No advanced species in the known galaxy exists without the bond imperative. The Kethmori mate for life at adolescence. The silicate collective shares consciousness in permanent triads. Even the warlike Gorthak cannot function without their battle pairs." Sarah felt a chill as the implications began to dawn on her. "Your Sovereignty, are you saying that humans are unique in this regard?" "Unique?" The sovereign's laugh was like crystal bells shattering. "Child, what you describe is not uniqueness, it is impossibility. No species can achieve space travel, complex technology, or social organization without the fundamental drive of pair bonding. The emotional stability, the cooperative instincts, the very basis of civilization itself stems from the need to protect and nurture one's chosen partner." The alien began to pace, its clawed feet clicking against the crystalline floor. "We have observed your species for 17 solar cycles, studying your transmissions and cultural artifacts. We believed humans to be like all sapient life, driven by the sacred bond between partners. Your literature speaks of love, your entertainment focuses on romantic connections, your social structures center around family units." Sarah's mind raced. "Those things exist, yes, but they're not universal human experiences. Many people live fulfilling lives without romantic partnerships. Then, how do you achieve anything of significance?" the sovereign interrupted. "Who motivates you to excel beyond basic survival? Who provides the emotional anchor that allows for long-term planning and sacrifice? Who validates your existence when facing the infinite darkness of space?" The questions hit Sarah with unexpected force. She thought of her own motivations, her drive to explore the stars, her commitment to science, her desire to expand human knowledge and reach. She had never needed validation from a romantic partner to pursue these goals. "We motivate ourselves," she said quietly. "We find purpose in discovery, in growth, in helping our species advance. We form bonds with friends, family, colleagues, mentors. We create meaning through our work, our art, our exploration of the universe." The sovereign stopped pacing and stared at her with what she could only interpret as a mixture of fascination and horror. You derive purpose from abstractions? From concepts rather than connections? Is that so strange? Strange? The sovereign's voice rose, causing the crystalline walls to vibrate in sympathy. It is beyond strange, it is revolutionary. Every species we have encountered, across thousands of worlds and millions of years, has been driven by the fundamental need for pair bonding. It is the universal constant of sapient evolution. The alien moved closer, and Sarah could see her own reflection multiplied hundreds of times in its compound eyes. Do you understand what this means? If humans can achieve complex civilization without the bond imperative, if you can find motivation and purpose in individual pursuit rather than partnership, you have broken the most fundamental law of sapient development. Sarah felt the weight of the moments settling on her shoulders. What does this mean for first contact? For relations between our species? The sovereign was quiet for a long moment, its 6 arms moving in what Sarah had learned were contemplative gestures. It means, Commander Chen, that your species is either the greatest evolutionary anomaly in the history of the galaxy, or the most dangerous. Dangerous? Consider the implications, the sovereign said, beginning to pace again. Every war, every conflict, every territorial dispute in galactic history has ultimately stemmed from the need to protect partners and offspring. Species fight for resources to ensure their bonded pairs can survive and reproduce. They expand territory to provide safe spaces for their mates. They develop technology to defend their loved ones from threats. The alien's voice took on an ominous tone. But, a species without such limitations? A species that can pursue goals for their own sake, without the moderating influence of partnership bonds? Such a species could expand without restraint, pursue power without the natural check of having something precious to lose. Sarah shook her head. That's not who we are. Humans value peace, cooperation, mutual benefit based on what foundation? The sovereign challenged. Other species choose cooperation because war risks their partner's safety. They pursue mutual benefit because it protects their bonded families. Remove those motivations, and what prevents a species from becoming purely acquisitive? Purely expansionist? The implication sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She began to understand why the sovereign seemed so unsettled by her revelation. To a universe where every species was fundamentally limited by their emotional bonds, humans must appear almost incomprehensibly alien. Your sovereignty, she said carefully, I think there may be a misunderstanding about human nature. While it's true that many of us function without romantic partnerships, we still have deep emotional connections. We care about our families, our friends, our communities. We form intense bonds with causes greater than ourselves. But, these bonds are voluntary? Changeable? The sovereign's compound eyes seemed to glitter with a mixture of fascination and fear. You can simply choose new loyalties, new purposes, new groups to serve? To some extent, yes. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah could hear the subtle hum of the ship's systems, the distant sounds of alien conversations from other parts of the vessel, even her own heartbeat. The sovereign stood motionless, processing implications that challenged everything it believed about the nature of sapient life. Finally, the alien spoke. Commander Chen, I must convene the High Council immediately. This revelation, it changes everything we thought we knew about the possible forms of intelligent life. Your species may represent the most significant discovery in our civilization's history. Is that good or bad for humanity? The sovereign's laugh was hollow. That, Commander, depends entirely on what we decide you truly are. Miracle, or menace. As if summoned by the sovereign's words, the chamber's walls began to shift and change, revealing viewing screens that showed the vast expanse of the Vextheri fleet surrounding Earth. Hundreds of ships, each capable of reducing a planet to ash, hung in space like sleeping giants. Your ship will remain here as our honored guest while we deliberate, the sovereign continued. But, I must warn you, Commander, the decision we reach will determine not just the fate of first contact, but, potentially the survival of your entire species. Sarah felt the weight of billions of human lives settling on her shoulders as she realized that her single status had just become the most important factor in humanity's future. The universe, it seemed, was about to judge her species based on their capacity to love or their apparent freedom from love's constraints. Sarah spent the following days in luxurious confinement aboard the Vextheri flagship. Her quarters were spacious and comfortable, with walls that displayed rotating views of distant nebulae and alien worlds. The food synthesizers produced meals that were nutritionally perfect and surprisingly flavorful, though she had little appetite given the circumstances. She wasn't entirely alone. A young Vextheri named Kexilla had been assigned as her cultural liaison, ostensibly to help her understand alien customs, but Sarah suspected the creature was also studying her, trying to understand how an unbonded being functioned. "Tell me about your daily routine on Earth," Kexilla asked during one of their conversations. The young alien was smaller than the Sovereign, with only 4 arms and eyes that shifted color based on emotional state, currently a curious purple. "I wake up at 600 hours, Sarah replied, settling into a chair that molded itself to her body. "Physical exercise for an hour, then breakfast while reviewing the day's mission reports. Staff briefings at 0800, followed by either training simulations or actual flight missions. Evenings were for research, reading, or socializing with friends and colleagues." "But who validates your achievements?" Kexilla's eyes shifted to a confused amber. "Who provides feedback on your performance? Who celebrates your successes or comforts you during failures?" Sarah considered the question seriously. "My commanding officers evaluate my performance. My colleagues provide peer review and support. When I accomplished something significant, I might celebrate with friends or call my family on Earth." "Friends," Kexilla repeated slowly. "These are temporary bonds? You can create and dissolve them at will?" "Not exactly. Good friendships require effort and commitment to maintain. But, yes, they're voluntary relationships based on shared interests, mutual respect, and emotional compatibility." The alien's eyes cycled through several colors rapidly, a sign of deep confusion that Sarah had learned to recognize. "Among my people, the Vextheri are bonded at the moment of emotional maturity. From that point forward, every decision, every action, every thought is considered in relation to one's partner. We literally cannot conceive of existence without this connection." "What happens if your partner dies?" Sarah asked gently. Kexilla's form seemed to shrink inward. "Unbonding trauma. Most Vextheri enter a catatonic state and die within days. A few survive, but they become different. Empty. They require constant care and supervision for the remainder of their lives." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime, and Kexilla's eyes immediately shifted to respectful blue. "The High Council summons you, Commander Chen." Sarah was escorted through corridors that seemed to pulse with living light, past chambers where she glimpsed other alien species, all, she noticed, traveling in pairs or small groups that moved with the synchronized precision of deeply bonded beings. She began to understand why her solitary state seemed so alarming to these creatures. The council chamber was vast, with seats arranged in concentric circles rising toward a domed ceiling that displayed the swirling galaxy above. Representatives of dozens of species filled the seats, creatures of chitin and scale, energy beings that flickered like controlled lightning, massive plant-like entities that communicated through pheromone clouds, and others too alien for Sarah's mind to fully process. What struck her most forcefully was that every single being was paired. The chitinous species sat in matched sets, their claws interlinked. The energy beings pulsed in perfect synchronization. Even the plant creatures had grown their root systems together into inseparable tangles. The sovereign Zyxthera gestured for silence, and the chamber fell quiet except for the subtle sounds of various respiratory systems and energy fluctuations. "Honored Council," the sovereign began, its voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. "We gather to address an unprecedented situation. The species known as humans appears to violate the fundamental law of sapient development, the bond imperative that drives all known intelligent life." A ripple of movement passed through the assembled delegates, antennae twitching, energy patterns shifting, chemical signatures changing. Sarah could feel the weight of hundreds of alien gazes focusing on her. "Commander Chen," the sovereign continued, "you have claimed that your species can function without pair bonds. The council requires proof of this assertion. Will you submit to deep scan analysis?" Sarah hesitated. She had no idea what deep scan analysis might involve, but the implications were clear. What exactly does this procedure entail? A new voice spoke from the council, a being that looked like a crystalline spider the size of a small vehicle. We will examine your neural patterns, emotional responses, and psychological foundations to determine the truth of your claims. The procedure is painless but comprehensive. And if I refuse? The chamber fell silent. The sovereign's compound eyes fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. Refusal would be considered evidence of deception. The council would be forced to conclude that humans are attempting to hide their true nature for strategic advantage. The unspoken implication hung heavy in the air. Sarah realized she was being offered a choice between invasion of her privacy or the assumption that humanity was inherently dishonest and, potentially hostile. I consent to the scan, she said quietly. The procedure began immediately. Sarah felt a strange tingling sensation as invisible energies played across her body and mind. She found herself reliving memories, her childhood, her military training, her decision to volunteer for the deep space program. But the aliens weren't just observing her memories, they were analyzing the emotional foundations beneath them. As the scan progressed, she became aware of excited murmuring from the council. The energy beings were pulsing more rapidly, the chitinous species were clicking their claws in agitation, and the plant creatures were releasing complex chemical signals that made the air thick with alien pheromones. Impossible, she heard someone whisper. The patterns are completely wrong. There's no bond anchor, another voice added. No fundamental attachment point driving behavior. Look at her motivation structures, a third delegate said. They're entirely self-generated. She creates purpose through abstract ideals and personal achievement rather than partner protection. The scan concluded with a sound like crystalline bells chiming in harmony. Sarah swayed slightly as the alien energies withdrew from her mind, leaving her feeling oddly hollow. The results are conclusive, the sovereign announced to the council. Commander Chin exhibits no trace of bond imperative psychology. Her motivations stem from what can only be described as individual will. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds, screeches, clicks, hums, and energy discharges that spoke of profound disturbance and confusion. This changes everything, declared a massive slug-like creature whose translator rendered its mucus secretions into words. If humans can achieve civilization without emotional constraints, they represent either the next stage of evolution or the greatest threat the galaxy has ever faced. Consider the implications for expansion, added a floating jellyfish creature surrounded by crackling electrical fields. Bonded species naturally limit their growth to protect their partners and offspring. An unbonded species could expand indefinitely, consuming resources without the natural checks that prevent overpopulation. Worse, interjected the crystalline spider being, they could develop technology without the emotional safeguards that prevent truly destructive research. Bonded species avoid certain scientific pursuits because they risk their partner's safety. Unbonded beings would have no such limitations. Sarah listened to the debate with growing alarm. The aliens were discussing humanity as if they were a disease that needed to be contained or cured. May I address the council? She asked, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. The chamber fell silent. The sovereign nodded slowly. Honored delegates, Sarah began, drawing on every diplomatic briefing she'd ever received. I believe you're making assumptions about human nature based on incomplete data. Yes, we can function without romantic pair bonds, but that doesn't make us emotionally hollow or morally unconstrained. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We form deep attachments to ideas, causes, and communities. We sacrifice for future generations we'll never meet. We risk our lives to explore the unknown not for personal gain, but to expand the boundaries of knowledge for all humanity. But these attachments are voluntary, the slug creature interjected. You can change your loyalties, abandon your causes, betray your communities if it serves your interests. We could, Sarah admitted, but we don't. Not because we're physically or psychologically compelled to remain loyal, but because we choose to. Our commitments have meaning precisely because they're freely given and maintained. A wave of alien communication passed through the chamber, too rapid and complex for the translation systems to process.
Sarah caught fragments, voluntary loyalty, chosen sacrifice, meaning without compulsion.
The sovereign raised its 6 arms for silence. Commander Chen, you speak of choice as if it were a virtue. But, choice implies the possibility of betrayal, abandonment, self-interest overriding loyalty.
How can any species trust beings whose fundamental nature permits such flexibility? Sarah felt a flash of insight.
Because, your sovereignty, our flexibility is also our strength. When circumstances change, when new information emerges, when better solutions become available, we can adapt. Bonded species might be locked into patterns that become obsolete or harmful, but humans can evolve our thinking, our relationships, our entire civilization when necessary. Or, the crystalline spider being said darkly, you could simply abandon inconvenient alliances and pursue conquest without emotional restraint. The debate continued for hours, with delegates arguing back and forth about the implications of humanity's bonded nature. Some saw humans as representing an exciting new form of sapient life, while others viewed them as an existential threat to the ordered galaxy they had spent millions of years building. As the debate raged, Sarah began to understand that she wasn't just defending her personal choices or even human culture. She was defending humanity's right to exist as they were, rather than being forced to conform to alien expectations of how sapient life should function. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. Whatever decision the council reached would determine whether humans would be welcomed as equals, treated as curiosities to be studied, or eliminated as a threat to galactic stability.
And it all came down to a simple question that the sovereign had asked days ago: are you without a partner? The council's deliberation stretched into its 3rd day.
Sarah remained in her quarters, watching the debates through a viewing screen that Kexilla had provided.
The young Vextheri seemed increasingly troubled by what they were witnessing.
They're scared of you, Kexilla said during one of their conversations, its eyes shifting between worried yellow and confused amber. Not just your individual capabilities, but what your existence implies about the nature of consciousness itself. I'm beginning to understand that, Sarah replied, watching as a group of crystalline beings argued with a cluster of energy entities. They built their entire understanding of sapient life around the assumption that emotional bonding is fundamental to intelligence.
We're proof that assumption is wrong. More than that, Kexilla said quietly. You're proof that their way of life isn't the only way.
For species that literally cannot conceive of existence without bonding, that's terrifying.
Sarah was about to respond when her communication device chimed with an emergency signal from Earth.
She activated the quantum entanglement transmitter, and President Morrison's face appeared on the screen, distorted by the vast distance but still recognizable.
Commander Chen, the president said without preamble, we've been monitoring alien transmissions around Earth.
Our xenolinguistics team has managed to translate some of the communications, and we're extremely concerned about what we're hearing.
Sarah's heart sank. Mr.
President, I'm doing everything I can to present humanity in a positive light, but the situation is more complex than we anticipated.
We're aware.
Dr. Martinez wants to speak with you about potential solutions.
Stand by.
The screen flickered, and Dr. Elena Martinez, Earth's leading xenopsychologist, appeared. Her usually composed demeanor showed signs of strain. Sarah, we've been analyzing the alien communications, and we think we understand the problem. These species literally cannot comprehend how intelligence can exist without pair bonding. To them, you're not just unusual, you're impossible.
How does that help us? Because, Dr. Martinez continued, if we can demonstrate that human bonding simply works differently than alien bonding, rather than being absent entirely, we might be able to bridge this conceptual gap. Sarah frowned. But, I am single, Dr. Martinez. I don't have a romantic partner, and I function perfectly well without one.
That's where you're wrong, the xenopsychologist said with a slight smile. Sarah, you're bonded to something more powerful than any individual, you're bonded to humanity itself. The observation hit Sarah like a physical blow. She realized that Dr. Martinez was right. Every decision she made, every risk she took, every sacrifice she considered was ultimately motivated by her commitment to her species' future among the stars. Think about it, Dr. Martinez continued.
You volunteered for this mission knowing you might never return to Earth. You're willing to die to ensure humanity has a future in the galaxy. That level of devotion and sacrifice, isn't that exactly what the aliens define as bonding behavior? Sarah's mind raced as the implications became clear. You're suggesting that humans don't lack the bond imperative, we've just evolved it to operate at a different scale? Exactly.
Instead of bonding to individuals, humans can bond to abstractions, to ideals, nations, species, concepts like justice or knowledge or exploration. We're not emotionally deficient, we're emotionally scalable. Kexilla had been listening to the conversation with growing excitement, its eyes shifting through a rapid spectrum of colors.
Commander Chen, this could change everything. If you can demonstrate that humans experience bonding at a species level rather than an individual level,
the Council might see us as an evolution of the bond imperative rather than an abandonment of it, Sarah finished. She felt a surge of hope for the first time in days.
Dr. Martinez, can you transmit documentation about human behavior that supports this theory?
Already prepared.
We're sending psychological profiles of astronauts, soldiers, scientists, and humanitarian workers who've demonstrated species-level bonding behaviors. The data should help you make your case. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah with renewed purpose.
She spent the next several hours studying the data from Earth, preparing an argument that could literally determine the fate of her species. When she was summoned to the council chamber the next morning, Sarah carried herself with new confidence. The assembled delegates seemed to sense the change in her demeanor, their various forms of attention focusing on her with increased intensity. The sovereign ZYX rose from its position at the center of the chamber.
Commander Chen, the Council has reached a preliminary decision regarding humanity's status in the galaxy.
However, you have requested one final opportunity to address our concerns.
Yes, Your Sovereignty. I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human nature. Sarah activated her portable display device, showing images and data from Earth. The Council has concluded that humans lack the bond imperative that drives all sapient life. This conclusion is based on the false assumption that bonding can only occur between individuals.
A ripple of interest passed through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, their attention fully captured. Humans do experience the bond imperative, Sarah continued, but our evolution has scaled it beyond individual relationships. We bond to our entire species, to abstract concepts, to the future of consciousness itself in the universe. She gestured to the display, showing footage of human soldiers sacrificing themselves to protect civilians they'd never met. This human threw himself on an explosive device to save strangers. His motivation wasn't individual pair bonding, it was species bonding. The next image showed scientists working in hazardous conditions to develop life-saving medical treatments. These researchers risk exposure to deadly diseases to develop cures for people they'll never meet. Again, species bonding drives their sacrifice. Sarah could see the alien delegates beginning to understand. Their various forms of communication created a subtle symphony of thoughtful consideration. Most relevantly, she continued, showing images of astronauts and deep space explorers. Humans regularly volunteer for missions with high probability of death specifically to advance our species' expansion into the cosmos. I myself volunteered for this mission knowing I might never return to Earth. My motivation isn't individual survival or pair protection, it's ensuring humanity's future among the stars. The crystalline spider being that had been most critical of humanity spoke first. You suggest that humans have evolved beyond individual bonding to achieve species bonding? Not beyond, Sarah clarified. We still form individual bonds, friendships, romantic relationships, family connections. But our deepest psychological drives operate at the species level. We can sacrifice individual happiness, even individual survival, for the greater good of humanity. The massive slug creature's mucus patterns shifted in what Sarah had learned indicated deep thought. This would actually represent an enhancement of the bond imperative, not its absence. Precisely. Where other species are motivated to protect and advance their partners and immediate offspring, humans are motivated to protect and advance our entire species and future generations will never meet. The energy beings began pulsing in excited patterns, their electrical fields creating visible aurora effects in the chamber's atmosphere. One of them spoke through crackling discharges. The implications are staggering. A species capable of bonding at the conceptual level could achieve cooperative behaviors impossible for individually bonded species. The debate that followed was markedly different from the previous day's discussions. Instead of viewing humans as dangerous anomalies, the delegates began exploring the possibilities that species-level bonding might offer. Consider the technological implications, suggested a plant-like creature whose roots had grown together with its partners in a complex tangle. Individually bonded species naturally limit research that might endanger their partners. But, a species bonded to its own future survival could pursue beneficial technologies more aggressively while still maintaining ethical constraints. And, the exploratory potential added a flowing, jellyfish-like being. Individual bonds create reluctance to venture far from home, limiting expansion. Species-bonded individuals would actively seek new worlds and opportunities for their species growth. The sovereign Zyxthera had remained silent throughout the discussion, its 6 arms moving in complex contemplative patterns. Finally, it spoke. Commander Chen, your proposal fundamentally alters our understanding of the bond imperative. Instead of viewing humans as deficient in bonding, we must consider whether you represent the next evolutionary stage of sapient development. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. Your sovereignty, I would suggest that different species simply express the bond imperative in different ways. Individually bonded species create stable, careful civilizations focused on protection and preservation. Species-bonded humans create dynamic, expansive civilizations focused on growth and exploration. Both approaches have value. Indeed, the sovereign said thoughtfully. And, perhaps, both approaches are necessary for the galaxy's continued development. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this statement settled over the assembled delegates. Sarah realized that the sovereign was suggesting something unprecedented, not just acceptance of humanity, but partnership. The council will vote, the sovereign announced. All those in favor of recognizing humanity as a bonded species expressing the imperative at the species level rather than the individual level? The response was overwhelming. Lights flashed, energy patterns pulsed, chemical signals filled the air, and various alien appendages moved in gestures of affirmation. Only a handful of delegates abstained, and none voted in opposition. The motion passes, the sovereign declared. Humanity is hereby recognized as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the chamber erupted in celebration. She had not only secured humanity's survival but had fundamentally changed how the galaxy understood the nature of consciousness and bonding. As the formal ceremonies concluded and she prepared to return to Earth with news of humanity's acceptance into galactic civilization, the sovereign approached her personally. Commander Chen, it said quietly, your species may prove to be exactly what the galaxy needs. We have achieved stability through individual bonding, but perhaps it is time for growth through species bonding. Your people's drive to explore, to expand, to seek new possibilities, these traits could benefit all sapient life. Thank you, your sovereignty. We look forward to contributing to galactic civilization. And we look forward to learning from you. After all, the sovereign's compound eyes seemed to twinkle with amusement. You have taught us that sometimes the most important bonds are the ones we choose rather than the ones we're born with. As Sarah prepared for her journey back to Earth, she reflected on the irony that her single status, the very thing that had initially marked her as alien and potentially dangerous, had ultimately proven to be humanity's greatest strength. By being unbound by individual relationships, she had demonstrated humanity's capacity for universal love, cosmic responsibility, and species-wide sacrifice. The question, "Are you without a partner?" had been answered in a way no one had expected. Humans weren't without partners, they had simply chosen the entire universe as their partner, and that choice would reshape the galaxy forever.